So, welcome back with Brian and Rhonda, and we are working on the seventh principle of our approach to Agile Portfolio Management. So, our sixth principle, and our sixth principle is our work type structures. So, let's give a little bit of description of what we mean by work type structures. When we say work type structures, what we mean is the hierarchy that is used to describe the work that's being done in the organization. Now, keep in mind, when we look at work type structures, the work types, we consider them value containers. And we call them value containers because these are the vehicles that transfer value from the company, from the organization to the customers. And what we want to do is we want to have work types that actually describe from the highest level, what's the highest level things that we're delivering that our executives can actually see. And when I say executives, this is our EMS, our EAT, and all the way down to the teams that actually deliver the work, right? So usually at the top level, we're dealing with strategic goals or themes. And at the team level, we're actually dealing with tasks and user stories. So that's what we mean by work types. What are your thoughts on this, Rhonda?
Yeah, so we need to just have enough in the structure, enough levels of the work types to be able to do a good decomposition. So this could actually differ from organization to organization. If you're in an organization where there's not a lot of complexity, or even a smaller organization, you might find that you can get by with a smaller number of work types. Or, the other extreme, if you're a huge company, huge organization, lots of complexity, you might find the work types that we have stated here might not even be enough for you. You might need to add to this. So these are the work types that we've been working with recent clients. But again, you're going to want to tailor this based on the situation and the company and the organization that you're working with.
Now, one thing that we should keep in mind, and you can see this in our diagram at the top or in our table, is that each of the work types, they have a time frame by which we expect the value to be extracted. And the value that we're extracting, remember, each one of these work types here, even though these are outputs, there's going to be a corresponding outcome associated with it, right? And the outcomes, those are expected to extract their values completely according to the time frames up here. So therefore, the outputs we have here on word types, they have to be complete within these time frames. So you can see the highest word types, strategic goals that Brian and Rhonda are using in our kind of standardized work type definitions. You can see that the time frame by which we believe these should be completed are 3 to 5 years, right? So these are big items directly related to how we move from our mission to our vision. But then we have a lower level here, right? That is 2 to 3 years, right? And these are our strategic objectives. So we take our goals, and with our word types, as we go from these more strategic to what the teams work with, you're going to see that they get smaller because they're decomposed. So you can see going from strategic goal to strategic objective, the time frame in which we develop them is actually smaller. And then what we can see here is that the initiative, our third level, is even smaller than our objective. And then our sub-initiative, well, we went from an initiative being developed in a year to our sub-initiative being developed in a quarter. And our feature It's just something that's bigger than a sprint, but it's got to be less than a quarter, or else it'll be a sub-initiative. And then you can see our stories are even smaller than that. So you can see progressively the work types get smaller and smaller. So they get decomposed. And that way we can assign them to different levels of our organization. But what are your thoughts on this, Rhonda?
Yeah, and you can see that second line there is a client that you and I worked with recently, Brian, where at that fifth level, they, instead of calling it feature, they chose to call it epic. And that is completely fine. I don't think you want to get caught up in what is the name, but actually that the decomposition is happening, and that that is clear on the definition of each of those levels. And so really it's not, I wouldn't get hung up on the terms so much as just making sure that the practice is happening with the time frames and the decomposition in place.
Yeah, the more important thing is to keep in mind that the size of these value containers should be proportional to the span of control that you have within the organization. So what I mean by that, to go into more detail, if I'm at a team level, teams should not deal with anything bigger than features and epics, because they don't have enough control over items beyond a feature or epic, right? They have control over user stories to do that themselves, and they can actually work with other teams to influence within the meta Scrum how features and epics are actually completed. But they can't control things in other departments and things like that. Anything outside of their meta Scrum, anything that's even bigger, those have to go to the next level. They would go to the chief product owner. So now the chief product owner is dealing with your initiative. So at each different role level that you have in your organization, they're only going to deal with one or two work type levels. And again, within their span of control in the organization. What are your thoughts on this, Rhonda?
Yeah, and that makes sense. I think you want to make sure that it is clear who is responsible and who owns each of the outcomes associated with each of those levels, so that there's clear responsibility assigned. And with the work breakdown structure, you want to align the roles depending on the complexity and depending on the size of which role is responsible for which of the work types in the table. That's really important.
Now, keep in mind as we go through this, I mean, this fits right in with the natural expansion capabilities of Scrum at scale. So if you have a small organization, you can actually have less of the work types than you see here, right? So if you have 3 levels, maybe you only have 3 work types or 4 work types. But as your organization gets bigger and you're expanding out, you're scaling, you scale it by adding in additional levels. And again, always keep in mind that whatever output levels you have of the work types, they're going to be a corresponding outcome level that's associated in your outcome-based breakdown structure.
Right. And you can really gauge right. And you can really gauge that, Brian, fairly evenly with how you're expanding your Scrum at scale. So if you're finding you're having to add more layers to your product owner cycle and Scrum's cycle, that as you're adding layers to that, because your organization is expanding, you might find you need to add additional work types into the table. There really is a relationship between the two.
Now, keep in mind what we've done here is we kind of laid out, here's the typical ones that we use. And what we try to do is we define everything we do by how long it takes to build it, how big it is as far as size, and that way they all share similar characteristics. But you can see we've compared different names and different methods. So PMI, their lowest level that the team's working on is tasks, or and safe, there are probably stories, and the highest level strategic themes. But in PMI, they have strategic goals, and that we keep in mind you can change the names of the different work types to match whatever the organization is, what they're comfortable with. So it's
Yep.
totally flexible.
And note that the times along the top, as you mentioned, Brian, and that will be one of the topics we cover in our next video.
So with that, what we want to leave you with is, again, you want to have a clear definition of your work types. They need to be spelled out, what the characteristics are of each, so that everyone's on the same page about what they need. And you can actually develop your own work type structure so that everyone can see this and it's visible, and you know what to expect when you run into one, right? I know this is going to take this long. This is this big, because it meets the standard we have in our organization. And with that, we will sign off for now, and we'll catch you next time with the last principle, which is one of my favorites. So we'll see you then.